Hi everybody, this is a short little video on Applied Behavior Analysis, or ABA. Our objectives and agenda are kind of one and the same. So we're going to talk about the definition of ABA, the 7 dimensions, how ABA works, and then some applications of ABA. So our definition is the science in which procedures derived from the principles of behavior are systematically applied to improve socially significant behavior. So we are taking all these principles of behavior, reinforcement, schedules of reinforcement, extinction, stimulus control, and we're systematically applying them to improve a socially significant behavior. So we want to improve a behavior that's going to be meaningful to a person. Now, there's a difference between behavior modification versus behavior analysis. And if you talk to more basic researchers, sometimes they do use these terms interchangeably, but I would say it's more accepted to use behavior analysis over behavior modification. If you talk about behavior modification, this is kind of an outdated term. It was mostly used for treatments that occurred in residential facilities or hospitals, treatments that aren't based on the principles of learning, so treatments such as electroshock therapy and things like that. They oftentimes used aversive consequences to decrease inappropriate behavior, and aversive consequences meaning things that were harmful to the individuals and things like that. And they didn't really look at the function of the behavior or the causes of behavior. Whereas behavior analysis, really, we focus on looking at the functions of the behavior, finding something for the person to still get what they want, just in a more appropriate way. We talk about positive treatments first before we use any type of punishment. And usually, we focus on, ABA services are provided in the public and private settings as well as individuals' homes. So there are some differences between the terms behavior modification and behavior analysis, and I would urge you guys just to get yourself to say behavior analysis and continue using that, and that way you don't get any of the negative connotation that goes along with behavior modification. We have 4 branches of ABA. We have behaviorism. This is a theory and philosophy that conceptual analysis. For example, Skinner applied the principles of behavior to government. I've seen an article that applies principles of behavior to Buddhism. So any type of conceptual thinking like that would fit under behaviorism. Then we have the experimental analysis of behavior. And this is your basic research, your experimental research. This is typically done in a lab in a very controlled setting. You're doing basic research on learning principles, typically done with animals, but it doesn't have to be. There is basic human research that's conducted with humans as well. But when you're doing that basic theoretical research, that's called experimental analysis of behavior. And then we have ABA, which is that applied aspect of behavior analysis. So you're taking those principles of learning and you're systematically applying them to change a socially significant behavior. And then you have the practice of ABA, and these are people that practice ABA, such as maybe teachers or animal trainers, but they don't have the actual certification in ABA. All right. The start of ABA, it started in 1968, officially started in 1968 with the first issue of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, or JABA. And in that issue, there was an article by Bayer, Wolf, and Risley that laid out the 7 dimensions of ABA. And this is the basis of our field. The acronym that you guys can use to remember this is get a cab. So we're going to kind of go through these. Let's talk about the G. General means, G is for general. It means that the behavior can basically generalize. It can appear in different environments. It can appear in different settings with different instructors, things like that. And so you want to look at, is a skill emitted in an environment where it was not directly taught? So can you reduce an inappropriate behavior in the clinic, and does it also reduce at home? Things like that. The E is effective. Its practical application should change the behavior it seeks to change. So if you want to decrease a specific target behavior, then your treatment should actually decrease that behavior. And you want to look to the data in that for this aspect. Are the data going in the right direction? Is the behavior actually decreasing? If you're trying to increase the behavior, is it actually increasing? What are the data telling you? Is your treatment being effective? The technological aspect are that the procedures are completely and precisely identified and described. So can your procedures be replicated? Think of a recipe. If you guys ever cook, you have to make sure that everything is completely laid out, it's described, it's detailed, or else you can't replicate that recipe. And so that's technological. Applied means you focus on behavior significant to the person. That's where we get that applied behavior analysis. You're looking at socially significant behaviors, so behaviors that mean something to the person and will make a meaningful change. Conceptually systematic is a C. It means that the description of procedures are technological and explained in terms of basic principles of behavior. So you're looking at, is the article, or are you explaining things in terms of reinforcement, punishment, stimulus control, extinction? Are you using those basic principles of behavior to explain your procedures and your analysis? Analytic means that you've identified a functional relationship between behavior and the environment. So remember, functional relationships are those if-then relationships. So your behavior is going to change when and only when the treatment is in effect. So have you actually identify that there is a functional relationship between the behavior and the environment? And last but not least, it should be, your target behavior should be behavioral. So the behavior is a target of modification in itself. So you're not trying to change some type of mental process. You have a specific behavior that you've targeted, you've operationally defined it, and that's what you're focusing on modifying. So those are our 7 dimensions. So make sure you guys go back over, look at those. And now let's talk about how ABA actually works. So the first thing you want to do when you're looking at a problem behavior and figuring out how to deal with it is to identify the behavior. So you want to identify a target behavior. You want to operationally define the behavior. Make sure that it's observable, measurable, all those things. That's that behavioral aspect of our 7 dimensions. Then you want to determine the function. The function is why the behavior is occurring. And we have specific procedures that allow us to do that. And we talk about a 3-term contingency. So we're going to look in the environment and look at what's going on before the behavior occurs and what's going on in the environment after the behavior occurs. And if we can determine this 3-term contingency, or our ABCs of behavior, then we can hopefully determine the function of the behavior or why the behavior is happening. Then after you've got your ABCs of behavior, you got your 3-term contingency, you want to rearrange the environment. You want to rearrange the environment in a way that you do not reinforce the inappropriate behavior, but you teach a replacement behavior so that the person still gets what they want, just for more appropriate behavior. And then you need to teach the new behavior if the child does not already have that behavior. Okay, so I have a case study for you guys. I'm going to present it, ask you guys some questions, and then if I were you guys, I would pause this video, answer the questions, and then come back to see if you answered them correctly. But we have Jason, 8-year-old boy with autism. He's in the 3rd grade. When the teacher asks him to do his schoolwork, he slams his fist on his desk and rocks back and forth violently in his seat. At this, the teacher usually lets Jason take a break and sit in the chair by himself at the back of the room until he calms down. Because this behavior occurs 4 or 5 times every day, Jason's not getting much schoolwork done. So I want you guys to identify what's your 3-term contingency, what's the function of the undesirable behavior, what's the desirable behavior, what do you want Jason to do, what's a good reinforcer for Jason, and then how can you systematically rearrange the environment to increase the desirable behavior and decrease the undesirable behavior. So in this part, you should have basically 2 3-term contingencies. You should have one for the problem behavior, and then what you're going to do with that, and one for a more appropriate behavior. So go ahead and pause it, see if you guys can answer this, and then come back. So here is your 3-term contingency. So the teacher asks Jason to do his homework. His behavior is slamming his fist on the desk, rocking back and forth, and his consequence is sitting in the chair by himself at the back of the room. So we would think that we would predict that the function would be escape. He engages in this problem behavior and he gets to escape from the task. He doesn't have to do his schoolwork. He gets to go sit in the chair by himself at the back of the room. The desirable behavior, what we want him to do, is to do his schoolwork or to complete his workbook problems. And a good reinforcer is what he wants, to sit in the chair by himself at the back of the room. So we can give that to him. We can just give it to him for doing his work instead of slamming his fist on the desk and rocking back and forth. So how are we going to systematically rearrange the environment? And this is what actually happened. So the teacher asked Jason to complete only easy workbook problems first. If the teacher asked him to do his schoolwork, and if he slams his fist on the desk and rocks back and forth, so if he engages in the problem behavior, there's no escape. He has to sit there and the teacher will continue to ask him to do his schoolwork until he does it. However, if he completes the workbook problem, remember, only really easy problems, then he gets to go sit in the chair by himself at the back of the room. So he still gets what he wants, but now he gets it for an appropriate behavior. So we have now rearranged this environment to where we are going to decrease the problem behavior and increase a more appropriate behavior. So there you go. So that original three-term contingency is disrupted, and now you have basically two different three-term contingencies. And initially, a reinforcement was given after every workbook problem. So every time Jason completed a workbook problem, then he would get his break, and then they extended that out. So then it went to after every 2 problems, then 3 problems, then 4 problems, then 5 problems. So I hope that gives you guys an idea of the three-term contingency, how it can work, how it's applied to problem behavior, and how you can rearrange the environment to decrease that problem behavior and increase a more appropriate behavior. All right, applications of autism. Applications of ABA. It's not just for autism. So autism is a huge field within ABA. We've had so much success. It's the only empirically based treatment. So we have a lot of just success in helping kids with autism. But since our field has been growing, we have applied ABA to so many different fields, other developmental disabilities, mental illness, community psychology, such as recycling behavior, seatbelt behavior. It's been applied to business, industry, human services. We have a whole section that we call OBM, so Organizational Behavior Management, and it takes these principles of learning, schedules of reinforcement, and applies it to the business world, which is really interesting. Very similar to IO psychology, just from a behavioral perspective. We can apply it to self-management, sports performance, animal training, obviously. There's been a huge push to apply these behavioral principles to gerontology, so to get in residential homes and assisted living places and actually help with medication and staff training and things like that. And then yes, finally, we can definitely apply it to education. We can apply it to classroom management and the general ed system, teaching in general, and also special ed teachers as well. So those are applications. We had tons of them. So we talked about definition of ABA, behavior modification versus ABA, the 4 branches of ABA, the 7 dimensions, how ABA works, and then some applications of ABA. So thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, please email me. Thanks, guys.